Writers, we study the work of other writers to make our own writing better. We have studied other writers to see what makes narrative writing unique, and we have also studied narratives to understand character development. Today we'll look at the ways Kathryn Lasky describes setting in her story, Marvin of the Great North Woods, to help us develop the setting of our own narratives. So our goal today is to look at the setting and describing the setting. So let's go to our table of contents. We're going to go to the next line, and we are going to put the next page number down and describe the setting. Once you have that done, let's go to our narrative lessons unit. In the elements page, go to setting description and ways to develop the setting. So make sure you add that right line in there, ways to develop the setting. Then go to the next open page, and this is going to be setting description. Notice I have some examples for you. We're going to eventually look at our own pieces to see if we actually describe the setting within our stories that we were working on. I'll give you a chance to get that all set up and labeled. Now that you have your notebook labeled, remember, when writers write narratives, they describe the setting, which is where and when the story takes place. So let's read how author Kathryn creates a picture in our minds of a new cold place Marvin has come to live. Listen as we read through it once. When we finish, help to understand and list down the ways that she describes the setting. Teachers, please read this with your students at this time. You'll want to highlight the areas that you find and pick out that describe the vocabulary of the setting. Go ahead and do this at this moment. Hopefully you were able to find some of the examples of the description of the setting. Some that you might have found were the smells, the smell details, like the smell of the hay and manure. Some you'll be able to find some comparisons or actually assimilate, like a pack of frantic grizzly bears. And that's describing how the narrator feels. So hopefully you were able to find some of those examples. One book that I really enjoy reading around the Christmas time is called The Polar Express. This book to me tells the story so vivid. I can visualize it in my mind as I read it. So listen while I read. I'm only going to read little bits and pieces of it, but let's see if you get an idea of what I'm describing and what it would visually look like without actually seeing the pages. Soon there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forest, where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. We climbed the mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon, but the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. The mountains turned into hills, the hills into snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice, the great polar ice cap. Lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. "It's the North Pole," said the conductor. The North Pole it is. It was a huge city standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first we saw no elves. The story continues, but reading that part, I definitely get a visual. How about you? If I were to read it again and you closed your eyes, do you think you would get a better visual? Now it's my turn. I want to get that visual too when I'm reading my story. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of close my eyes and imagine that I'm writing the story as a movie. I want to see what I see. As I think about the story that I've written, I go back to when it happened. When I close my eyes, I see this crystal blue sky. So I'm going to take another page in my notebook and I'm going to write down crystal blue sky. I also visualize that white cotton ball clouds. Cotton ball kind of describes it a little bit more than just white clouds. I remember seeing that bright sun off in the distance. I also remember seeing many, many people there. People of all different colors, and they were waiting for the same exciting thrill ride. Those were some of the things that I visualized when I thought back on what happened that day of my personal narrative story. So I might want to go back and add, your job will be the same. Today your job will be to write some of these setting descriptions into your personal narrative story. So here's what I did. In my third paragraph, I wrote, on this beautiful crystal blue summer's day, the sun shone bright overhead with cotton ball clouds formations periodically crossing its path. We waited in line for over an hour to ride the Millennium Force roller coaster at Cedar Point Amusement Park in Sandusky, Ohio. We had heard great stories of the enormous climbs and drops this ride produced. To me, that tells the story of what this visually should look like for my reader to understand a little bit better. Remember, writers describe setting when they write personal narratives. Today you can start a new personal narrative, or you can continue writing one that you started already. Just make sure to describe the setting. Before you write today, whether you are returning to a draft you already started, or you are starting a new one, close your eyes and visualize an imaginary movie. Jot down some setting details in your notebook that you could add to your story. When you have your setting details brainstormed, write your personal narrative. Remember, read your narrative back to yourself. Find where you describe the setting. If you don't see any setting details, mark a spot and make sure you add some the next day. Happy writing!